Here we are at the violet spoke, the very last one. And depending on which thread you get, it might be any one of these. These two are DMC. This is the Satin. This is actually the one I have on my needle right now. So any of these are going to be just gorgeous. And I'm starting with these little teardroppy paisleys. Let's call them paisleys, sort of leafy paisleys. And I am using a padded satin stitch, which we have done before. We actually did it over here on the pink one, but these were little tiny skinny ones. But even though I've already shown you how to do a padded satin stitch, let me show you how I am doing these. I've got 3 strands and I'm just putting a couple of stitches on either side of the center vein, just inside there. And like, I don't know, 1 stitch right there. It adds just a little bit. And now I can come in and I can start, I'm just going to do a satin stitch that goes at an angle that goes all the way up this side, and as it gets around to the top here, I'm going to slowly change my angle for it to be, try to have 1 stitch that's straight, and then I'll keep working around and I'll go this way, and then I'll do satin stitches all the way at an angle this way. And even though I have put these little bitty padded, these little stitches on the inside, it makes it a little hard to see the center vein, the center line, but that's okay. The main thing to keep in mind about this one is just how sharp to make your angle. You know, I talked before about, you know, making little tiny satin stitches that go like that are harder than angled stitches that are a little bit longer. So I'm aiming for longer angled stitches. Just kind of guessing where that center line is. But once again, this is a beautiful stitch. Oh, that one was not quite angled enough. Once again, this is a beautiful stitch to show off the variegation of the thread, the colors. The ones I've already done, you can see that. So I'm rounding the top here. Gonna make my stitches a little bit shorter. And then this might be my top center one, so it kind of goes down the center. And now I'm going to start changing my angle to go around the other side. Lengthen that angle a little bit. Stitching over those padding stitches. Now my angle has gotten a little bit more angled. And probably maybe can do 1 more stitch. This might be pushing it. It might be on top of that one, but I'll come down here and make that point right there. Okay. All right. So those padding stitches just give it a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of dimension. Do that for all of these and then we're done with that section. I stitched up everything else in this center section. All of it is on the stitch diagram. It's all things we've done before, so again, no need for you to watch me do that again. And you know, except for one thing, this center teardrop, elongated teardrop shape, I don't know what I had planned there. I think I was just going to leave it blank, but I kind of looked at it and it seemed like it just needed something. So I'm going to add 3 French knots. So I've made myself some little dots. You don't have to put those there, but if it makes you more comfortable to have them marked. And I'm using 3 strands, and I just want a larger one, a medium one, and a small one. So I've got 3 strands, and I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3 for a large dot, and then come here and do 2 wraps, 1, 2, and then a smaller one. Wrap it once. And that is one reason, get over there in the center, you. That's one reason I love French knots, because you can have very subtle differences in size just by how many times you wrap them, using the same number of strands. All right, so that's the center section. Let's move on to this circle up here. When I was trying to figure out what to do for this very last circle on the whole hoop, I was kind of stumped. And then I realized, you know what? I have not, we have used chain stitch in several different ways in other places on this hoop, but we have not used chain stitch as a filling stitch. And it's one of my favorite things to do. I really enjoy, I just think it's a really cool effect to put a chain stitch in a spiral in a circle to fill a circle. And of course it's going to be gorgeous with variegated thread because again, it'll be one of those stitches that really shows off the pretty colors. And it just could not be simpler. Start anywhere. I like to start on the outside edge as opposed to starting in the center and working out. I work on the outside edge or start on the outside edge and work in. I don't know that it really makes a difference, honestly. And previously we talked about the reverse chain stitch versus the traditional chain stitch. And this is one of those places where I definitely prefer traditional chain stitch because not right this minute, not when we're first doing this very first row part of the spiral because there's no other stitches around. But remember how I kept talking about reverse chain stitch because you have to put the needle under those loops? It's going to get really hard here when we are working in here. We've got, you know, 3 rows over here to try to get that needle in between and under and not catch other threads. So that's why I like the traditional chain stitch for filling a shape like this. I also, since it's a curve, my usual rule applies. If it's on a curve, go ahead and make those stitches small. Don't make them, you know, like if I'm, you know, see where that needle's coming up? See how it's way out there? Can you see that? Don't make them that long because it'll just look kind of choppy. Go ahead and make each stitch a little bit shorter and it'll follow that curve really nicely. So that's it. Those are my, I mean, that's the only thing, like I said, traditional, and then make them short, and then just when you get around to here, just hit, you know, do it right here, and then on this next stitch, just jump in and just keep going around in a spiral. This is it. This is the very last line we need to make on this spoke, and except for this little triangle part, then we will be finished with this beautiful rainbow hoop. And so what I'm doing on this line is called a Palestrina stitch. It's another knotted line. It has several other names. Honestly, I can't remember all the other ones right now, so I just call it the Palestrina stitch. But it's really, really tiny here, so I am going to use some thicker yarn and really close up so you can see exactly what I'm doing. It's not hard, but it has a couple of steps to remember, and it's easier if you can see it when it's really, really close up. So I'm going to show you that, and then you'll see what I'm talking about when you see these little tiny knots along here. The Palestrina stitch creates a line with knots along it. So it's a knotted line, but it also, on either side of each of those knots is a little branch or little arms. You can work the Palestrina stitch vertically like I have here. You can work it horizontally from left to right, whatever makes sense to you. I prefer to work it vertically like this and work starting at the top, working towards me. So the first thing you're going to do is come up, and then you're going to make sure the thread is above your working area. Drop down just a little bit, come to the side of the line, go down and come straight across on the opposite side of the line, come up, pull that needle through, and now you have this little angled stitch. This feels a little strange because it's not along the line, but I promise it'll all work out. Now take your needle, come back underneath that angled stitch across, making sure that this thread is below here. And now when I pull that, I'm going to have 2 little arms. See that little Y shape right there? I'm going to put the needle through the right side, this right arm. Underneath that one, I'm going to make sure that the needle goes over the working thread, pull it through, and then when I pull that little knot, it pulls the line straight down the center again. So now I have a little branch on this side and a little branch on this side, or two little arms. To continue, do the same thing. Make sure the thread is above your working line. Drop down. On the right side of the line, go in, straight across. On the other side of the line, pull the needle through. Now I have that same angled stitch, making sure that this thread is down. Go underneath that arm. Now I have my two little arms again, making sure that the thread is down again. I will go through just the right arm, over the working thread, pull it through, and now that little knot forms in the center. One more time, and this time you can vary what this looks like by how long you make these arms. So this time I'm going to, again, put the thread above. Now I'm going to come way out on the side and come up on the other side, equal distance away from the line. I'm going to do it even more. So that's really long. My thread's above, pull the needle through. Now I have a really long, a really extreme angle right there, making sure this thread is down. Come under that arm, pull it across, go through the right arm and over the working thread. And that little knot forms in the center. And now you can see how where these arms were short, these little branches, this one's really long. I can go back and make another one that is short again. There's my right arm. Make sure this thread is down. Under that arm. There's the right side. Through the right side, over the working thread, and there's my knot again. So as you can see, it's really pretty simple in the sense that you're always going through that right arm. The most confusing thing about this stitch, I think, is where to put the thread, if it's above or below. So when I do this stitch, I constantly repeat to myself, when I start, thread above, in, out, pull, thread below, through, thread below again, through the arm, over the thread, and pull. Thread above, in, out, through the right, or thread below, through the right arm, thread below, through the right arm, and over the working thread. Repeating that to myself over and over is what helps me get the thread in the right place, because when I first started doing this, I was messing it up and I couldn't figure out why. And the reason was because I was going over the thread when I shouldn't, or under the thread when I shouldn't. Does that make sense? So that's the little repeated instructions I say to myself each time I do this stitch, and it comes out correct every single time. Now that you've seen how to do this stitch, I'll show it to you in this thread, but it's the exact same way. So I put the thread above, come down, scoop up a little tiny stitch. There's my little arm. I'm going to come, now the thread's going to go down, come under that arm. Now there's my little Y, the two little arms. Really hard to see because they're super tiny now. But now I'm going to make sure the thread's down, and I'm going to go just under the right arm, over the thread, and there is the next knot. I'll show that to you again. Thread up, scoop that stitch. There's the first arm, and I come straight back across underneath it with the thread below. There's my two arms. Now make sure the thread is down. Go just at an angle through the right arm, over that working thread, and there's the next knot. So there you go. That is the Palestrina knot. Even though this is called the One Meaningful Word number 7 design, the word box or the word, putting the word on this design when you're finished is completely optional. I've made it that way on the last couple of One Meaningful Word designs that I did because not everybody wants to do a word. If you want to, you can do it, and if you don't want to, just completely skip this part. But very similar, we're going to make this box, this word box, very similar to the way we did it if you did the one with me last year, where we traced it onto fabric and put it onto some cardboard and then stitched it on. That's the short version. But so let me get into exactly how we're going to make this. I'm going to talk about the supplies in just a second, but it occurred to me that I should mention one very important thing about this. For this one, I am not going to stitch this word. You certainly can if you want to, but it's pretty small, and these words would be pretty easy to stitch. Last year's was a little more difficult because it was cursive, but you can choose to either do all of this and stitch the word, or do the way I'm going to show it to you and just leave it as with the marker, okay, the permanent marker. So let me get into the supplies. It'll make a little more sense when we get to that point. But here are the supplies you'll need. You'll need the word box and word list printed out. You will need a little piece of white cotton fabric. I've cut this one to 3 by 4, but the size doesn't really matter. It just needs to be able to fit over this, be larger than this box up here, because we're going to trace that, okay? Then you need a piece of, this is heavyweight white poster board. I get this at Walmart. It's not just regular poster board. Regular poster board today is really flimsy, and you could use that. You could even like glue 2 pieces of it together to make it stiffer. But this has a little bit more stiffness to it, and so it's easy to cut, but it holds up a little bit better. You will need a Frixion gel pen for us to draw some lines that can be erased. As I always say, the disclaimer about this is that you know, you got to know that these lines don't necessarily go away completely. It can leave a little bit of a line. We're working on white fabric, so the lines that you would be able to see on this one are going to be around the edge, and they're so faint you won't even really see them. But just if you're ever using this Frixion and people say it erases with heat, it does, but there's still a little bit of a line left. So just know that. The last thing we're going to use is a permanent black, very fine tip marker. This is the Pigma Micron. It's from Sigma is the name of the brand, and it has a very fine tip. Hopefully that is in focus. This is an 05. You can also get, if you can only find like an 03 or an 01. The 01 is really small, very, very fine line, but it would work too. You could maybe just go over your lines a little bit more. The 03 is fine, and this is the 05, all right? And there's one other item that you don't have to use, but you can use, and that is an iPad, or you could also use your phone. I'll talk about that a little bit more. You don't have to have this. You can always use a sunny window. I use sunny windows all the time when I'm tracing things with my pattern, so that works great. Because we're working on all white, you know, I have a white table here and I have a white piece of fabric. I could probably be able to see through pretty well, but using the iPad, or a light box, if you do have a light box, you don't have to go out and buy one for this, so don't feel like you have to do that. Or the sunny window, getting some light behind this will make it a little bit easier to see exactly where these lines are. So let's get to exactly how we are going to do this. We're going to start out with our printed word list, but it has these boxes at the top. And I'm going to place this fabric. I've ironed the fabric so it's nice and smooth. I am going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see this better. All right, now that you can see that a little bit better, I have placed the white fabric on top of these 2 boxes, and just to be safe, I am going to get 2 pieces of tape. I'm using masking tape. You don't have to use masking tape. You can use, you know, Scotch tape, like clear cellophane tape. Just 2 little pieces on the side that'll keep the fabric from moving around. And then I am going to trace both of these boxes with the Frixion. I'm going to turn this a little bit so my hand is a little bit steadier. Okay. And I'm just going to trace around these boxes. Now the outside line is going to be where we're going to cut this fabric. And the inner box is going to be just a guideline for when we are putting it onto the cardboard. So neither of these has to be perfection. There are the boxes. Now I will remove the the fabric from up here. And then I'm going to find the word that I want to use. The word I am using for this one is right here. It's imagine. So I'm going to take this fabric and I am going to center that word underneath, you know, it's under the fabric. I'm going to center it in that inner box, just like that. And then I'm going to use the tape again to hold. That got weird. I'm going to tape that down again. Make sure that my word is centered in that inner box. Now this is the part where I can just do it like this, just like I did the boxes. You know, the boxes didn't really matter if they were perfect. I do want the word to be I want to be really neat with the word. And so I could just do this again. I can press down on that fabric and I can see it pretty well. But it's going to help me if I use, as I said before, a light source behind it. So I am going to, so what I'm doing is I have downloaded an app called Lightbox Trace. There's a free version, so you don't have to pay for it. And I think it should be available. I'm obviously on Apple products, and so I don't know about non-Apple products, but I'm going to guess that hopefully there is a Lightbox app that would work for you. So I already have it pulled up here. Okay. So here's what it looks like. So it's just a white screen. Let me zoom back out. Here's my iPad. It's just a white screen. This little box down here, if I click on it, it just gives me a white screen, okay? Now it's gonna be, so let me do this. I'll put this on top of that light box and it doesn't look much different. That's because I have all this light flooding down on it from the top. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna turn off my other lights so that, so now you can see, hopefully, again, I will zoom in for you. Now it is much easier for me to see that word behind this fabric. This works if you are tracing a design onto your, like to stitch, like the whole design. If you have a light colored fabric and you want to trace a design on, you can, you know, put the printed pattern behind the fabric and then trace it on like this. So that works great. So that's just a little tip for you. Again, like I said, I usually use a sunny window or my swing arm lamp on my desk. But anyway, this is if you want to use a light box. So now I am going to again use the Frixion pen to trace this word onto here like this, because this is not permanent. And if I mess it up, then it's okay. I haven't, you know, it's not that big of a deal. If I mess it up, I just cut another piece of fabric and start over. It's not that much fabric, right? But I'm just going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to press on the fabric so I can see it well, but I'm going to be very careful now to carefully trace these lines onto the fabric. That G is hard to tell. It almost looks like an O, but And there's my word with the Frixion pen. Let me move my iPad out of the way and turn the lights back on. And here we are with the word traced onto the fabric. I can take this off again. Tape is probably going to pull off the rest of the words, but that's okay. I'm going to take the tape off. I don't need that anymore. And now you can see that that word is pretty easy to see. So now I'm going to take the Micron, the Pigma Micron pen, and I'm going to very carefully trace over my the blue lines here. Blue or black, it doesn't matter what color Frixion you have, but I'm going to trace over those now, just like I did before. Okay, so I haven't done the whole word, but you get the idea. And this is the point. Instead, if you want to stitch these, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to use the pen. If you want to stitch them, that would be great. If you are stitching them, I would suggest that you start with a larger piece of fabric. And at this point, very carefully make it big enough to fit into like a small hoop, like a 4-inch hoop maybe. So cut it like a 6-inch square or so of white fabric, and just after you've traced the word on with the Frixion, pop that in a hoop, stretch it very carefully so you don't stretch it out of alignment, and then stitch this with black thread, maybe 1 strand of black thread. That would probably be just fine. So if you want to do that, but I am going to be using the Micron Pigma pen. At this point, you might be saying to yourself, because I almost said it to myself, okay, now I can go in there and I can take the hairdryer to this to get rid of if there's any lines, Frixion lines showing under my word. But not so fast. I do not want to do that yet because I do not want to erase these outside boxes. That's why I did not, I mean, eventually I will do that, but I don't want to do it now. Make sure you do not trace over the boxes with the permanent pen. You don't need to do that, just the word. Speaking of, okay, sorry. Next step is we're going to create the cardboard piece that's going to go underneath the word. So let me grab my scissors. So now I'm going to go back to this. Let me zoom out for you. Other way. So now I'm going to go back to my printed piece of paper. And I am going to cut out the inner box only. I do not need to cut out the outer box, just the inner one. That. And now I will take here's my white, the heavyweight white cardboard. And let's see, I don't think I'm going to do it. Yeah, I guess it'll fit that way. Let me grab a pencil. All right, this one has a nice sharp point on it. And then I am just going to hold that box in place, and I'm going to carefully quickly trace around it. Like, make sure it doesn't shift while I am tracing. All right, so there is my cardboard. Now I'm just going to cut that out like this. So there's my little cardboard piece that I'm going to mount this fabric on. The first step to mounting your fabric is to cut it out on that outside line. Like that. And now you'll see that when I place this little piece of white poster board, this little rectangle, that it should line up with the box that we traced earlier. That's why I had you draw that box, so that you could, center it nicely on behind the word. Now we are going to, so it's going to move around just a little bit, so don't worry about that. But now we're going to miter, so when we turn it over, we're not just going to like randomly fold these over because it gets a little messy. We're going to miter the corners. And what mitering the corners means, again, let me zoom in for you. So when you miter the corners, you fold over one corner at a 45-degree angle, and you glue that down, and you fold the other one down at a 45-degree angle, and they should meet at a point right there. Okay, and then you're going to do that on the other end. So that's why it's kind of hard at first because this kind of wants to move around on you, but that's okay. Again, sometimes I will like peel this, just go like that, and I'll just kind of realign it. Plus I can see if it's centered back here. And so it's a little bit fiddly at first when it's not glued down at all. I am using white tacky glue. There are several different brands. This is one brand. I have here, I have a little fine tip, a bottle that has a very fine tip on it that I use when I am gluing something with white glue like this. And here's another little tip for you. Keep, like even this big bottle over here, I also keep it stored upside down so that the glue is always down here in the tip. If you keep it right side up, the glue runs down to the bottom and you have a pocket of air up there and it tends to dry out the tip. If you'll always keep your bottle of glue like this stored upside down, every time you use it, the glue is right there and it has not dried out. So that's why this is upside down in a little jar. But if you don't have a little bottle like this, I would not try to use the big nozzle out of the big bottle of glue and squeeze some on. What I would do is I would squeeze a little bit of white glue onto a scrap piece of that cardboard or just any scrap of paper, then use a toothpick and pick up a little teeny tiny drop of this glue and put just a little tiny piece back here. You do not want to use this glue. You don't want to smear a whole wad of it on the back of this because it will cause this to warp. But that's also the reason that I'm using white tacky glue as opposed to like a thin Elmer's glue. Don't get me wrong, Elmer's makes a tacky glue and that's fine. But you don't want to use like the thin, like school glue type of white glue because it's so thin, it's very watery and it's not as sticky as this, and using the tacky glue means that you can put a little bit on and when you press down whatever it is you're gluing down, it'll stick to it better. So anyway, like I said, so I'm going to attempt to do this and not have it mess up on me. So I'm going to flip the top off of this. Here's my fine tip, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on there. I need one more hand. I'm going to put the lid back on my glue, come on, and store it back again. So, all right, so there's my little bitty tiny dot of glue, and I'm going to fold that over at a 45-degree angle. So this is another time to be really careful because the glue will, also if you put a ton of glue, it'll just soak right through this fabric. This soaks through a little bit. But be careful if you've ever used your finger to like press down and then you've got glue on your finger, don't come around to the front of this and stick your finger all along the front. So just, try to only use like maybe the same finger over and over, and you don't have to press hard, just give it just a second for it to stick down. Okay, you have to be a little neat with this. And then I'm going to put another tiny dot there You can see how small that little dot of glue is, and then I'm going to fold this one over. And because we've sized it with those boxes that we traced, it should meet at a point like this. It should not overlap right here. Okay, so I'm going to give that just a second to work, to get sticky, like that. And then I'm going to come around here and I'm going to do the other end just the same exact way. After I've done all the corners, I will put another little dot of glue there. And I will fold over this point. Hopefully it will sort of maintain its little point right there. So I may need to hold that down for just a second. And you can see a lot of times after I use a finger with the glue, I'm rubbing that glue off. So again, I don't transfer it to the front. So that's another way to keep the front clean, is just to constantly you can put a wet paper towel nearby or just rub it off your fingers. So that's that end, and I'll do the same thing on the other end. Here's how it is looking now on the front. Here's what it looks like on the back. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing. Oh, that one wanted to pop up, wasn't quite dry. So now I'm going to put a thin line of glue right along this edge, and I'll fold this side down and hold it until it dries. And then I'll do the same thing over here, thin line of glue, fold this down, hold it till it dries. Here's our word, almost finished. Here's what it looks like on the front. Here's what it looks like on the back. And so the reason that we cut it to the size that we did, and we tried to be real accurate in the reason we mitered the corners, is so that it had less bulk here on the back. If I just like crammed a bunch of fabric back there, it would sit up too far on the fabric when we attach it to the hoop. So that's what it looks like. And my word, when I pulled the sides around, the word got a little wavy, but that's okay. We're just gonna say that that's got some character, right? The only thing left to do now is you can still see the blue edges of the Frixion pin. So now I'm going to take this in there and I will just hit it with the hair dryer and get those lines to go away. And then the word box will be finished. And here's the part where I should be showing you the video of me sewing this box down onto the fabric, but I did not make that video. So you get to see a still photograph. But all you have to do is just use one strand of any color thread. I just chose the yellow thread because it was a light color. Use one strand and just put a tiny stitch at each corner from the back. Just capture just a little bit of that fabric that you folded over onto the back of the box, and just sew it onto the center of the hoop. It does not need a lot of stitches because it's not heavy and it's not going anywhere. Just one little stitch in each corner will keep that little word box right in the center of your hoop. So now all that's left is for me to say thank you. Thank you for joining me on this project. I hope you had a wonderful time. I loved stitching it. I hope you get a lot of joy out of all these colors and these stitches, and I hope you learned a lot. I will see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.